Edison, please.
Thank you. Good morning and salam sejahtera, and welcome to the briefing session designed in the format of a webinar entitled Green Fashion, Get in Vogue with ESG and Explore Untapped Markets. The webinar has been put together by People Prowess in collaboration with MATRADE in conjunction with the Federation of Malaysian Fashion, Textile and Apparel, AGM. It is also part of a series of industry briefing and engagement by MATRADE. My name is Edison Chung. I am the Deputy Director of Trade Publication, Strategic Planning Division of Malaysia External Trade Film Corporation. I'll be your moderator for today's webinar. I hope everyone is living a healthy, fashionable and sustainable life. Also, I hope you are ready for this briefing session, or we will call this webinar. Allow me to quickly highlight some of the house rules for participants and speakers. All participants are to mute their mics throughout the webinar so that we only hear the voice of respective panelists and not disturbed by any other sounds. Should there be any questions, please use the chat box, especially during the Q&A. Your questions will be answered by respective panelists during the webinar. And please state your name, organization, together with the question. If you need a written reply after the webinar, we appreciate your email contact. Before we proceed, I do see that we have 30 plus people who are online. Perhaps we can all on our cameras so that we can have a group photo. Please put on your best smile and most stylish gesture. Molly will help to take the photo once we have everyone's camera on.
Yes. Okay, I will count down and then we'll have a picture, right? Okay, yes. So everybody's in? Okay, so shall we? 3, 2, and 1. Fantastic. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Molly. Ladies and gentlemen, the Malaysian fashion industry is expected to hit 12 ringgit Malaysia, 12.13 billion this year, growing at a CAGR of 15.3%. The fashion industry is expected to balloon to ringgit Malaysia 18.64 billion by 2025. Although this may seem insignificant comparing to some other sectors, the rapid growth is, however, a major achievement, considering the market was worth just 2.47 billion in 2017. The rapid growth of the fashion industry comes with an astonishing environmental and social cost. According to the United Nations, the global fashion industry is estimated to be responsible for 8 to 10% of global carbon emissions, industry pollution, use of water, and gender inequality. To expedite sustainable growth, local fashion industry needs to improve its ESG credentials in order to compete effectively and break into new global markets. But what are the risks associated with ESG? What opportunities remain unexplored due to lack of ESG credentials? Today's 1-hour webinar seeks to create awareness on the strategic importance of ESG and to promote growth of domestic fashion industry in a sustainable manner. The webinar will feature 3 panelists who will give a 10-minute presentation each. After the third presentation, a Q&A session will commence. We will then wrap up the session with a brief summary. Let me just share a little bit on the panelists. The panelists are Mr. J. Shankar. He's a KLite with a first-class economics degree, an MBA in e-commerce, and an executive education from University of Cambridge, UK on circular economy and sustainability strategies. His 20-year-plus career includes stints in 2 trade promotion agencies, MATRADE as well as Malaysian Timber Council. He has also worked in the media publication, namely New Straits Times and Malaysian Business Magazine. In MATRADE, his experience include leading trade promotion and communication projects, as well as co-founded leading industry association in various countries and regions, namely Thailand and Frankfurt, when he was Malaysia's Trade Commissioner. He is currently the Director of Oil and Gas, Chemicals and Energy and Sustainability Lead in MATRADE. The next panelist is Ms. Kalpana Singh, owner and founder of Kalpana Design Studio and its learning arm DSU Club that conducts courses in fashion design and dressmaking. She's a postgraduate in leather apparel design technology and has 2 decades of experience in fashion industry, where she has been a designer, merchandiser, and now a teacher. As part of a design studio, she has been actively creating bespoke garments. She has also showcased her design collection at Malaysia Fashion Week. The final panelist is Mr. Todd Rosin, Global Business Development Officer, Turnkey Group. Mr. Rosin has lived around the world in many countries such as Japan, Korea, China, Hong Kong, Singapore, Belgium, and USA. He has extensive background in growing business in multicultural environments, having many success stories, including leading organization through a state-of-the-art management tool to answer the question, how do I profitably grow my business in domestic and international markets? Having spent 7 years of focusing on technologies that positively affect the environment in areas such as green packaging, Mr. Rosin has immersed knowledge on how companies can collect the right data, measure and analyze to improve their sustainability and ESG performance. Ladies and gentlemen, let's start with Mr. Jai's presentation entitled Relevance of Sustainability to Exporters. Mr. Jai will talk about the increasing environmental issues, economic and cultural differences, the regulatory framework, and the great attention to social responsibility, forcing fashion companies to face the challenges of sustainability. Mr. J will narrow down to global trends related to sustainability that can impact exports, as well as the challenges and opportunities arising from adhering to sustainability practices. The floor is yours, Mr. J. Shankar.
Hang on. Sorry, can you hear me? All right. Okay. Sorry about that. Yeah. Okay. So basically, thank you, Edison, first and foremost, and Salam Sejahtera. A very good morning to everybody, colleagues from the industry. So my name is Jay Shankar. So what I'll do is that I'll basically run through basically the aspect of sustainability related to exporters. And then from there onwards, it's going to be a quick 10 minutes overview. And then from there onwards, I think where we'll truly benefit will be on the Q&A aspects of it. I will cover on export growth and sustainability, and then a bit on international trade and sustainability, and then perhaps some aspect of what MATRADE is doing in regards to sustainability. This is a bit of trade numbers, a bit of good news as well, so to speak. If you look at the numbers in terms of exports for last year, the textile, apparel, and footwear industry has done tremendously well, where export numbers have gone up by 13.1%. Whereas the import numbers have contracted. In other words, the industry looks healthy from a trade perspective. Secondly, looking at the key exports and imports, I just want to do a quick overview of the industry from a trade perspective so that we will understand how important the whole sector is vis-a-vis the trade industry. Now, if you look at in terms of exports, US, Japan, Turkey, Singapore, and China. These are predominantly 5 of our largest export destinations. And what's crucial to see that every one of these countries are and have very strong sustainability related measures and regulations and expectations. In the case of Turkey, for example, is a gateway to the EU market. Singapore is quite advanced in terms of its ESG compliance, and China is also moving quite strongly, and all of us know about US as well. Now, a bit on sustainability and international trade. what's interesting today is that sustainability or ESG compliance is not necessarily something new. However, the difference this time around is that there is serious and real pressure from various stakeholders, be it from a country level, industry level, even institutional partners. Yeah, and this push has come because of various government to government commitment that has been given, including by the likes of Malaysia. For example, under the Paris Agreement 2030 agenda, Malaysia has committed, and the latest COP26, Malaysia has committed various targets that it will follow through. As a country, by 2050, we're expecting to go net zero carbon. Yeah, and what it sort of translates to is that from a country commitment, then it comes down to the industry commitment. And from an industry commitment, then it sort of cascades down to all the supplier chain. So ultimately, what has happened is from that 17 SDGs that it has pushed for, it has now translated down. Every SDG will go down the supply chain. In the case of the fashion industry, United Nations has an Alliance for Sustainable Fashion. 2019, they launched it, and they're also pushing it from that perspective as well. So clearly, there is going to be a lot of pressure on Malaysian industry to conform to ESG compliance. A bit on trade FTAs, for example. Yeah, if you look at some of the FTAs that we have signed and about to sign, or exploring to sign, there is strong commitment for ESG compliance. We are looking at CPTPP, a Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership. In that, you have at least 2 chapters that is very specific to ESG. You have the labor chapter, and you have the environment chapter, yeah, chapter 19 and chapter 20. Both has very clear targets on what needs to be looked at in terms of commitment for ESG. And if you look at bilateral FTAs, Malaysia just, I think 3 days ago, we announced that we're going to restart our FTA with EU. Now, if you look at how EU has been doing it, from its earliest free trade agreement with Korea, it has always had these trade and sustainable development chapters, TSD chapters, yeah, which focuses on aspects such as environment, labor rights, climate change, and responsible business conduct. So you know for a fact that these commitments are going to be enshrined, embedded into FTAs. And once Malaysia commits on an FTA level, then naturally the industry has to follow soon. So typically what will happen is that then the greening of the supply chain will have to be in place. So that is from the country perspective. But if you look at other stakeholders are also involved. You look at groupings of retailers. For example, under RBA, Responsible Business Alliance, many of the largest retailers are already with them. You have Nike, for example, you have Costco, you have Walmart. All of them are part of RBA, and RBA is very big on responsible labor initiative, right? So those are expectations from an industry perspective. And then you have also potential pressure from somewhere that I think most of us haven't really given focus to, but this is probably going to be your biggest pressure coming from. It's from your finances, from your bankers. A lot of bankers have also given commitment on their end that a lot of trade financing will start looking into aspects of ESG. Now, this will probably blindside a lot of our companies. Exporters will not expect this, but this is happening. Not only international banks, but local banks have also started putting a lot of initiative in trying to conform to global expectations. Yeah, and again, what will happen is that if you do find a buyer who's interested in ESG, and he's going to request for that compliance, if that doesn't happen, then the bankers will step in as well to make sure that that happens. Yeah, so those are from policies perspective as well as stakeholder pressure, and then you have on the ground level the consumers are also expecting. Yeah, our data basically shows more than 90% of global consumers are expecting ESG compliance. Now, the challenge now is this: unlike in the past where they could not communicate whatever their feelings of a particular brand, today through social media and all that, they can do that. They can actually communicate their unhappiness on their expectations. So that would potentially impact a lot of our brands if we don't look into it. I'm not going to go into so much on a lot of these expectations, because I think most of us already know that this is happening. But what is, I think, critical to note is that what is the government is basically looking at. Yeah, from a government perspective or market perspective, we have initiated a project called SAFE. Yeah, and SAFE is basically to look into the industry and to strengthen the industry. What can we do? One of the things that we're doing is we're building a dedicated database of green products and services, which we can then give priority in terms of our promotion work. So if within your industry, within your association, if there are companies that are already doing well, we want to adapt them and we want to champion them. So this will be our first liner, the tier 1 companies that we like to support. In fact, in some of the trade fairs that MATRADE has, we're already, in a way, informally looking at this as a selection criteria, right? So I think this message has to go down to your companies that moving forward, a lot of the criteria when we are picking companies, looking at our champions, we will look at not only the product aspect of it, but we will also be looking very seriously into the aspect of ESG adherence. These are some of the collaborations that we are doing, awareness and learning collaboration series under SAFE. SAFE is basically a project that we do to strengthen the exporters. And over here, I think the association can play a role. If it's possible, we like to find avenues where we can collaborate with associations, either from an awareness perspective, where we sort of, provide awareness, or learning perspective, or maybe we can collaborate in some sort of meaningful ESG related projects. And final 2 words basically is this. For longest of time was price and quality. Today, sustainability is the 3rd variable for buyers to make decision. So we need to be really aware. All our 46 officers worldwide is telling us this, and the rate of this adoption is going to be very quick. So let us be aware of that. And the other thing I think we need to be basically stress on is that, because whenever we talk to SMEs, they always talk about survivability. They said, we cannot afford sustainability. And the messaging that we like to give out is that sustainability equates to survivability. If you want to survive, you need to go into the sustainability process. With that, I'd like to now end the session and hand it back to Edison. And hopefully the little briefing would have served its, given you some insight on MATRADE's viewpoint on the aspect of sustainability. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jay, for the overarching topic on sustainability. I will not go through the highlights now because due to time constraint, we'll move on to the next panelist, Ms. Kalpana Singh, who will share about sustainability issues for fashion industry. She will give some answers to how makers can make an impactful change. She will also talk about some techniques in designing brand sustainability and concept. Ms. Kalpana, the platform is yours.
Hi everyone, is my screen available to everyone?
Yes, we can see your screen.
Okay, great. So, okay, thank you, Edison, for the introduction, and I would like to greet all the members here, speakers and leaders, and thank you for making me part of this conversation. And when I say conversation, I mean people like me who are in the industry, who are on the making side, who I believe are as important as the consumer themselves. As we all know, in the sustainability puzzles, designers can be a major change agent, just like consumer. Although consumer do require their entire... is that Yeah, so as we know that the consumers are as important in this entire sustainability puzzle, they do require an entire paradigm shift in their thinking, in their consciousness towards environment. Similarly, designers play a very important role in this entire thing. Although based on my interaction and discussion with the fellow designers and with the learners of fashion and the makers, it is thought and believed that sustainability in fashion is like a unicorn, that it is not practical for many reasons. One of the most important reasons, what many people believe, many designers and makers organizations, they believe, is because of its long supply chain, which is so complicated and requires so many players in it, right from procuring the material, to distribution, to garment construction, to finally when it reaches the consumer and then when it gets disposed. There are huge community and society impacts that we create as the fashion makers. So while most consumer goods suffer from the similar issues, what makes fashion industry particularly problematic is its pace of change that it undergoes. It is so fast changing. Not only it undergoes the fast change, it encourages the change. With every passing season and micro season, consumers are pushed into buying the latest item in the trend. If you want to look trendy, you have to buy new fashion. And that's what this fashion industry survives on, because they want the consumers to buy more. So what we as makers can do, can we bring the change? Can we create the impact that we're looking for? I believe that we can, maybe not a lot, maybe as designers, as fashion makers, we cannot do a lot, but we can try our best in that direction, just by incorporating few smart techniques when designing and by keeping an overall understanding of the brand sustainability goals, of your brand's sustainability goals, that what do you want as a designer or for your company. We have to find a way back into the product life cycle. We have to understand the product life cycle. It's a very linear life cycle right now, where we also call it cradle to grave, where the product is produced and then it just ends up at the grave. By grave, I mean landfill. So it gets produced, gets distributed, goes to the consumer wear it once or twice, and then it just get mercilessly discarded. So how we can as designer produce that? And uninformed or poor choices at design stage can hinder the ability of a product to enter the circular economy. And sometimes the amount of time and energy and resources required to do so is so high that it does not make sense as a company to engage in that. For example, even if you do want to bring it back to your production cycle after the material is disposed, it's just so difficult because the material has gone through so much of finishing or dyeing, or the construction has been so difficult that if you want to bring it back into your cycle, you have to spend more resources, more labor, more water, and more electricity, that at the end you're producing more carbon footprint than you initially planned to do so. So it does not make sense for a lot of makers. That's where I feel designers, when they design the product, they keep the sustainability in mind. Designer needs to think towards that direction. They have to tweak their methods and design making concept, the way they're developing their concept, they have to keep that in mind. So let's have a look at how the linear product cycle looks like. This is how it is. As you can see, the material is procured, material is produced, and then it goes to the production and then goes to the consumer. Consumer, it doesn't even go directly, it goes to the wholesaler or distributors and the retailer, and then finally gets disposed. And one connecting element everywhere is the transportation. So imagine even if one particular element here is reduced, that the transportation doesn't happen a lot and is locally resourced and everything, then you could reduce a lot of carbon footprint there. In circular economy, however, have a look at this, how it happens. So we also call it, cradle to cradle approach, where the product is made and then it finds its way back into the system again. So as you can see, the circular economy, the product has found its way back in the life cycle, either by being the raw material for the new production cycle or by being circulated among the consumer in the form of recycled or upcycled product. We hear these words a lot these days. These are the buzzword, upcycling the product. But that is only possible if the designer has designed it to do so. Now, some of the techniques the designers can use, and I teach that during my classes, during the workshops, during the sustainability awareness, that There are 6 things that you need to take care, and I'm going to briefly go through them. I understand the time is limited. First is dematerialization. Dematerialization is the reduction of the number of material and energy used in designing the solution. So it's like basically miniaturizing your designing. You're making them very minimal. Minimal design actually are the trend in the market because we know the consumers are very well aware. They are exposed. They know the hazards that the fashion industry is creating on the environment, and hence this is what the consumers are demanding. So your design needs to be very minimal in approach. So it uses the material just enough for that material to be useful. Now, I'll just give a quick example. As growing up, we all in schools, we had this huge desk and chair. I don't know if you all can relate, but now if you see the classrooms, the chairs are very compact. It has a desk attached to it, right? It just serves the entire purpose. You don't need to have so much of material in order to be useful. It maintains the usefulness of the material of the product, yet it uses the minimal amount of the material that is required. So that's dematerialization that designers must keep in mind when they're designing the product. Next is durability. We all know what durability is. Durability is the resistance to biodegradable, not biodegradable, the degradation. Basically, the material is not getting spoiled very fast. It's durable. We all remember that earlier the clothes were made by our friendly neighborhood tailors, and then not only was it worn by us, it was worn by our siblings and the cousins, and then it was used as cleaning, for dusting and everything. I still find some clothes back home when I go home that I wore as a kid. So that's how amazing and durable the clothes were during those days. But now, unfortunately, after one wash, either the color runs out or it starts pilling. Pilling is the small balls that comes out of the fabric, or it just starts sagging and it's not wearable. So the material, the product is so poor quality that the consumers are not able to use it for too long, and hence they're forced to buy more material. The durability of the product will help the consumer to use it much longer. Basically, you're pushing the demise of the material to pushing it a little bit forward, so it doesn't die off very soon and doesn't end up in the landfill very fast. And that can only be done if it is durable. If it is durable, you can sell it in the second-hand shop. There's a huge increase of second-hand shops recently. You can go sell them at thrift shop. You can even upcycle them, make them better, make some other products out of them. The durability of the product is very important. Next is the zero waste. There are certain zero waste techniques that the designer can incorporate, like making the patterns in a way that they are aesthetic, nice looking, yet they are very minimal and functional at the same time. And the patterns that you cut, the pattern just uses the right amount of fabric that's required. So we don't waste a lot of fabric. There are a lot of designers who are using these pattern cutting techniques, which doesn't waste the fabric. Disassembly is another function where the product can be dismantled easily. You can reclaim some material out of your garments. For example, you can take out buttons, zippers, and labels, which also at the end create problem for the environment. And that can be reused again if your product can be dismantled. There is this new patented thread that can be microwaved. If you put the garment in a microwave, you can actually dismantle the entire garment without much effort. So these new techniques are coming. So designers should look out for those kind of new trends in the market and try to incorporate those in your design. Then upcycling, we're all aware of what upcycling is. Upcycling is not recycling. We have to be aware of that. Upcycling is making the product even better than what it was earlier, not downcycling. Downcycling is when you make them into a much more lower quality material. But upcycling is using, for example, denims. A lot of designers these days, they use old denims and create new jackets out of it, do a lot of handcrafted work on it and make something totally beautiful and new out of it. And then the last one is monomateriality. This, according to me, is very, very useful. Monomateriality is basically using one type of material, and instead of having a cocktail of material used in your product, because that, at the end, prevents it from getting back into the system again. Now, I will not dwell a lot on that. At least I'm able to, tell you the terms, what are involved in this, and you can find out more about it. See, when it comes to fashion, like I said, there is no perfectly sustainable, but our goal as for sustainable fashion brands or designer is to do our best by striving to improve the supply chain so that we make less negative impact on the planet and its people. And I'll just end my presentation with this quote that clothes are not going to change the world, but people who wear them and make them can. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Kalpana, for the very informative and interesting angle on sustainability and design in particular. Design indeed plays an important role in making green fashion more functionable. The third presentation is on ESG and risk management for fashion industry by Mr. Todd Rosen. Mr. Todd Rosen will share about sustainability and ESG, which has become a regulatory requirement in EU, Middle East, and USA markets. He will focus on the risks that the companies face of not having a sustainability or ESG plan. May I call upon Mr. Todd Rosen to start your presentation?
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, Edison. Can everyone see my slide and hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Again, thank you for this opportunity. It's certainly my honor to be part of this webinar and to talk about ESG in the fashion industry on a global basis, but also how it pertains to companies that are participating in the fashion industry, whether it's a domestic fashion industry in Malaysia or supplying to the global fashion industry from an export standpoint. I've been involved in the fashion industry in several aspects over the last 7 years. And I think it's fair to say that every fashion brand that is out there in the world today, no matter where they're located, has a sustainability policy in place. Whether it's Nike, Levi's, who I've met with PVH that does Tommy Hilfiger and Calvin Klein and other brands, Untapped that has the Zara brand, M&H, their Ralph Lauren, these major brands that are out there. In addition, I've met with some very small companies that are located in the UK, the US, I'm sure there's many in Malaysia, in Australia, and even the small brands that are just a fraction of the global fashion industry, all have sustainability policies in place. You can see here, this is Ralph Lauren's circle of sustainability, if you will, and you can identify the key aspects, not only from the design function, and of course we would expect protect the environment aspects, but also the champions to better lives and the social aspects of participating in a sustainable fashion environment. The challenge that these brands have is most of them don't make their own products. They source their products from garment manufacturers, footwear manufacturers, accessory manufacturers from around the world, and hopefully increasingly in Malaysia there. And not only that, not just their garments themselves, but they source the packaging, the accessories, the tabs, the hangers, the other parts that make up their marketable product from suppliers in these global locations. So it's fair that these brands have a sustainable policy and have ESG programs in place, but the challenge for them is really they'll roll this right down to their suppliers. And that's where the big challenge really becomes, is how a fashion brand rolls down their sustainability policy and ESG metrics down to their fashion brand and the manufacturers that they support. So I look at it from a very operational standpoint. The 4 pillars of operational excellence that I've identified, and I talk with the manufacturers, the suppliers, and the brands that are out there in the fashion industry. You have to have that product technology. And as we heard just now, that product technology and the design of that product is a key part and key element of your sustainability and ESG effort there. You have to have the quality processes in place, ISO certifications and so forth, to make sure that you're making a quality product, not only for the consumer, but also to your customers if they're the major brands. And then value for money. You have to have the right processes in place, Lean, Six Sigma, these state-of-the-art manufacturing processes to extract the most value out of your product. One, so you can offer high value to your customers, but also so you can make a profit yourself and be able to expand your business. So the fourth pillar now is really the environment and social governance, ESG. As a brand would look into a supplier and say, you have to have a good product, you have to have high quality, you have to have good value for money. They are now also saying, I want to know your ESG performance. And they will come in and conduct these audits in your facility, which is very time consuming and can be also very, very expensive. So in order for you to comply with not only their requirements, your customers' requirements, but also the consumer's requirements, you have to be in a position to be able to calculate, be able to analyze, measure, and report on the key metrics that drive your ESG performance, which really shows, or which really will drive your sustainability policy. So the key elements of ESG that both brands and manufacturers need to rely on are not just reporting on electricity. You can't calculate your greenhouse gases emissions or your carbon footprint by reporting on your electricity data there or water consumption. You have to combine all the elements of the environmental side, which is energy, water, waste, and operations, with the other aspects of ESG and the social side. Fuel, logistics, all of this goes into play, but also diversity in your employments, your training of your employees, your health and safety record, the social aspect of your business and how you're treating the community in working with the community there. And then, of course, your risk management side of it. Not only the risk management side of are you complying with regulatory requirements there, which is high risk, but also risk management when it comes to energy usage, water usage. Are you in an area that's prone to drought? Is a local energy network and grid capable of supplying your energy requirements? Are you in an area where you can find labor? Are you in an area that is prone to, say, environmental issues that are not under your control? These are all part of managing risk when you look at ESG performance. If I just go back a little bit, so part of the aspects of ESG is having the right tools in place. And as I mentioned with the 4 pillars, you have financial tools, you have technology tools for product design, you have quality tools, you have production tools, and really you need to have the right tools in place to be able to collect the information needed. To give you a brief example, a supplier to Nike and Levi's and H&M and Inditex, they have 36 plants around the world. They are required to report on their ESG performance by their customers, there. And the challenge that they had was, when I talked to the managing director, was we just can't collect the information needed, the data that's needed for us to analyze and report on the metrics that we've identified, or they have identified for us. One plant will give me an Excel spreadsheet. Another plant will send me a fax copy of an electric bill that's in Chinese, as an example. And so it's incredibly time consuming to be able to track all the metrics, measure them, analyze them, and prepare the necessary reports to have a good ESG process in place. So with that being said, there are various, and I use this slide here, but I wanted to highlight it for this fashion industry. There are so many frameworks that are out there that are being put in place for various industries: banking, private equity, finance, manufacturing, all of these, GRI, TFC, TCFD, IFC, SASB, the EU taxonomy regulations that are coming into play. But the key ones for the fashion industry are Blue Sign and the Higgs Index. These are ones that have been in place that manufacturers, brands, and manufacturers in the fashion industry, especially major brands, look to, that if you are Blue Sign approved or if you're Higgs Index approved, then you have the right processes in place. The issue is, for many manufacturers, there is collecting the data that's required by both Higgs and Blue Sign to be able to get their approval. So that's why I go back to the statement: you have to have the right tools in place to be able to collect the data, analyze it, measure it, and get it in place. So it's very complex. It's not something that's easy to do. There are tools available that are very cost effective, I say, and offer a good rate on return for SMEs along with major manufacturers. Please look into those because they will certainly be able to help you to comply with the ESG requirements and have a good sustainability policy in place. So thank you very much. With that, I'll turn it back to Edison and the group. I appreciate the opportunity and look forward for everyone to have good ESG processes in place.
Thank you, Mr. Rosin, for giving the audience another interesting angle of ESG and sustainability, and some of the highlights on the 4 pillars of operational excellence, data management. Without the collection of data related to ESG, decisions made could be flawed and hence leading to disaster and dilution in business relevance. And of course, managing risk is hence critical. I trust the collective insights thus far has triggered more excitement and enthusiasm about practicing sustainability in the fashion industry. It is clear that sustainability is important, and both the private and public sector have a role to play in making sure our products and services value chains are in line with ESG and sustainability. Let's move on to the Q&A session to get more information and deeper insights. Participants are to key in your questions in the chat box, and we will answer the question accordingly, the panelists particularly. But meanwhile, I have some question maybe for Mr. J. Shankar. What are the long-term plans for developing sustainable exporters by MATRADE? How can the companies get prepared?
Okay, thanks, Edison. I guess a quick answer is two. One is that MATRADE would like to build a database. I think I mentioned that just now. We like to basically identify which are the Malaysian companies that have already taken that path. It's very important for us to have champions. At this point of time, I think that pool is not necessarily very big. So we like to grow that pool, strengthen them, provide any sort of capacity building initiative that's possible, a training or assistance, certification, and so on, as well as MATRADE like to play that role where we like to plug them into any sort of funding that's out there. Not necessarily only government funding, but there are also a lot of private sector funding. Banks, for example, Bank Negara has launched a $2 billion fund for companies to do what they call the transformation to low carbon footprint. That fund is about 2 billion. It's about 5% soft loan. Bank Negara is promoting it within a lot of local banks. Not much, I think I've heard about that being, taken up by the companies. So these are some sort of facilitation you would like to do to make sure that our exporters are, ultimately competitive and able to compete effectively, not only on price and quality, but also on the aspect of that. And then the final component is to basically prepare them to be able to do storytelling, because that's the other thing that we noticed, that a lot of companies, you can't do everything, right? But whatever you have done, talk about it. The storytelling element is very important, and MATRADE would like to support the SMEs on that basis as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. J. And indeed, MATRADE is there to help and assist Malaysian exporters, and there'll be more engagement, I believe, Mr. J, with the industry as well as the companies directly. There's a question for Mr. Todd Rosin in the chat box. What is the acceptance of HIG index across the ASEAN countries currently? Is this a compulsory requirement? Your mic is muted.
Sorry, there. I would say maybe a two-part answer to this question. The Higgs index is been around for a while in the fashion industry. I would say it is generally very accepted across, I'll say, major suppliers, garment manufacturers, footwear manufacturers in the fashion industry. So it is pretty well accepted throughout the region. I think the key point of it is being able to collect the data necessary, especially for SMEs, in order to be able to get a Higgs certification there. So that's a key point as far as being able to go and submit the information that's readily needed to be able to get a certification for Higgs, and also to be certified by Blue Sign in Switzerland as a sustainable supplier to the fashion industry.
Thank you. I hope that answered the question, Ms. Regina Louise. Let's move on to the next question. Ms. Kalpana Singh, I think you also represent the Fashion Revolution, an NGO that supports sustainability cause in the fashion industry. In the fashion industry, there's this notion for perhaps fashion, fast fashion and high fashion, right? Can you please explain a bit on fast fashion and high fashion in the context of moving forward for the fashion industry to operate profitably?
Thank you for the question, Edison. It's a good question. A lot of people get confused about this, that what is fast fashion? And when I have to explain it in a very layman term, because I educate a lot of kids also about it, and they are very direct about asking the question. And when they ask me, what is the difference? And I tell them, what is the difference between your home-cooked meal and your fast food? That is the same difference between your fast fashion and slow fashion, as you would call it. Fast fashion is basically based, the profitability itself, the entire business model is based on the fast pace of its change. So as you can see, there are 4 seasons that we put. There are autumn, winter, spring collections, summer, spring collection that we have. But now the companies have even micro seasons. There's companies, there are brands who change their collection on a weekly basis. That's what the fast fashion means. When you want to offer to the consumer that many choices that they feel that they need to have those, just to stay in trend, just to stay relevant when it comes to fashion. That's what, and it's a very, demand and supply kind of a relation, and it goes so, interdependent on each other. It's because the consumer demands it, the brands offer it, and because the brands can offer it cheaply, and that's why the consumers can demand it. And why the brands are able to offer it? Because they're able to make it cheaply, that they're able to get low wage labor, they can delegate their production to different country altogether where it is made in a sweatshop environment and at a very cheap cost. So that's what the fast fashion is, and the answer to that is to have the slow fashion. Slow fashion is to have a long-term relationship with your clothing, to nurture it, to make it, so as the founder of Fashion Revolution, Ms. Ursula, she says that when consumer discards the material so mercilessly, it is disrespectful to the people who made it, to all the parties that invested their time, energy, and resources into it. So not being disrespectful and being environmentally cautious is what the consumer needs to do, and hence invest their time, their resources, money into products which are slow fashion, which are going to last longer and have some meaning behind it.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Kapana, for the insight. And I think it's something that fashion designer or companies can think about it. There's a question for Mr. J. Would MATRADE come out with any tax incentive for exporters with sustainable products similar to export excellence allowance and etc. in the future?
Thank you for the question. It's a very interesting question. Well, first and foremost, that mandate is not to us, it's with the ministry, with MITI. But having said that, is MATRADE supportive of that that sort of approach? Yes, to a large extent, clearly the SMEs require such support. In fact, until late last year, we had a fund which supported certifications, taking up a certification by SMEs. And then moving forward, we have also indicated the need for a certain level of tax incentives and so on. But having said that, one of the biggest, I think, the push for us in terms of creating awareness and so on is to basically encourage SMEs to look at the existing funding infrastructure that's available. There are a couple of tax incentives already in place. For example, green investment tax allowance, green investment tax allowance for assets and projects. There's also a green income tax exemption for services. It's all sort of handled by MGTC. And as mentioned just now, Bank Negara has a soft loan as well. So it's critical, I think, for us to really take up the journey on SDGs and ESGs, but not fully reliant on government support. While the government support is there and will definitely come, in a greater way, the speed of change needs to take place now, and so I think we cannot afford to wait. Yeah, so I think the journey has to be taken on as soon as possible. So quick answer is yes, MATRADE is supportive. We like to put in other things, but when it happens, we are not too sure. But the SMEs or companies, exporters cannot wait. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. J, thank you for the clarification and some of the views of the future that we can assist the industry. Mr. Todd Rokins, you mentioned about managing risk. Perhaps you can share a little bit on how big are the risks of non-compliance to the local ESG industry?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, very, very good question. Excellent question. There's several elements of risk. And one, of course, is certainly compliance with local regulations, reporting standards, and so forth. And certainly as governments, national governments, but also local governments are now stepping up their requirements with regards to ESG reporting, it's going to be more critical that you have the right data, the right information with accepted calculations that you can present in order that you're meeting the particular compliance and regulations. But I think, as Ms. Kampala also had mentioned in her brief, the biggest risk to any fashion brand is their customer or the consumer's acceptance. If you don't have, and that's why every brand has a sustainability policy in place. And the risk is, I think, as we look into the future, the consumer is going to be much more intelligent. They're going to be much smarter about what's going on, and they're going to recognize greenwashing as they get more exposed to all aspects of climate change, and I guess the news and media report on companies that talk green but aren't green. I was interacting with a sourcing fashion sourcing company in the UK, and the CEO came out with the statement, "We're going to be net zero by 2030." Well, that was all fine, well, and good, but the question I had to him is, how are you going to accomplish that? Most of your requirements are in what we call scope 3, which is supplier related there. So he has to drill down to his suppliers, which are all across Asia Pacific and parts of Eastern Europe. And so how is he going to accomplish that without having the right tools in place? So coming out to the consumer to make a statement like that without a plan on how you get there, and ESG is really a journey. It's not something you do year one and all of a sudden you've got this great ESG rating and performance. It's really a journey, and it takes time to really be able to meet goals like, you know, net zero at 2030, and we can all debate about whether that's even achievable net zero, carbon neutral there. So the risk, I think, to companies are really, you know, consumer acceptance on what your sustainability and ESG policies are. And then let me add there, the risk of SMEs that don't have a good ESG policy in place are at the risk of losing customers, not complying with their customers' requirements there. I was interacting with a company in Malaysia, an SME that was supplying to the fashion industry, and they were frustrated by the amount of audits that they had to comply with and the cost of the audits, because, you know, when a customer comes in and audits a facility, they don't do it free of charge. They say, if you're going to be a supplier to us, you have to pay the airline tickets, you have to pay the hotels, you have to pay our staff's rates, and so forth. And that can be quite expensive if you don't have the right tools in place to do it, or if you don't have the right data in place to be able to surpass that audit. So you run the risk of losing, a brand runs its risk of losing its customers, its consumers, and a SME or garment manufacturer, footwear manufacturer, accessories manufacturer runs the risk of losing its customers and not complying with its customers' requirements. So it can be very risky.
Thank you. There are a few questions more in the chat book, as some are more of a comment, but I'll read them out now before we wrap up the session. There is some uncertainty on how the International Sustainability Standards Board from IFRS Foundation will impact business globally. How will ISSB impact the fashion and retail industry? Not directed to anyone specifically, but those who have answered can quickly share your views in a few minutes. Ms. Kalpana, or would you like to share this?
I am not aware of International Sustainability Standard Board, so I don't think I'll be able to comment on that. Looks like a very relevant question to me. Perhaps I would want to know more about it, actually.
Mr. Rosin,
If I may just add, this is just, you know, as I mentioned before, there are so many frameworks that are out there that are in the sustainability space. This is just another one of them. And if this is one that the industry needs to comply with, you need to really look at what they're requiring you to report on. There are a lot of consultants out in the industry today. Some specialize in this particular framework. Others specialize in GRI, others specialize in TCFD. So If this is a framework that is really that you believe you need to require to comply with, there are people out there that can help you and consult and advise you on how to comply with it.
Okay, thank you very much for the sharing. And we have come to the end of the session. Some of the questions that we have not answered, we can liaise with the company or individual later. Firstly, just a little bit of a summary of what we have learned today. Sustainability is survivability. I think Mr. J has ended his presentation just now very accurately on the messaging. And I'm sure the fashion industry is aware of various incidents, including the Bangladesh incident in 2013, right, whereby Rana Plaza garment factory collapsed. And that was the beginning of intensification of sustainable and ethical fashion, or what we call maybe today as green fashion. Today, being green is something expected with the vast opportunity and positive trend in green fashion as shared by the panelists. Malaysian companies are encouraged to leverage MATRADE's global presence to grow their exports in line with sustainability, as what Mr. J has emphasized during the webinar. Fashion players could also collaborate with one another to enhance their knowledge and skills so that they remain modern and relevant as well as competitive. Ms. Kalpana's sharing has helped industry players to appreciate the importance of sustainability and ESG practices. From the discussion during Q&A, we also learned about the challenges faced by fashion companies, such as meeting sophisticated customers and financial and banks that have increasingly focused on ESG metrics and demanding businesses measure and report their ESG footprints. In Mr. Rosin's sharing, we see that data plays an important role in helping a company collect, monitor, and improve processes and ensuring success are documented. The system has to be measurable to ensure green elements are recorded and reported. Embracing green is vital not only for global business, but local as well. Taking cognizance of this, complementing the useful contents shared by our esteemed panelists today, may I take this opportunity to thank the panelists, MATRADE, FMFTA, and all attendees for your presence and participation. Today is just the beginning of our conversation on sustainability and ESG involving the public and private sector. Let's continue to cultivate our green journey together. Till we meet again next time, thank you, take care, stay green, and be gracious to human lives and our shared environment. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you to MATRADE. Hasna, are you here?